Hi everybody, welcome to week 7. Week 7 is exciting because we're halfway through the course at this point. It also is the point where we begin to actually apply all this knowledge you've been learning through your readings, through your writings, everything that you have learned about instructional methodologies, about what constitutes a good research assignment. You're actually going to be able to use that information to develop a really great lesson using understanding by design. And I think you know by now the framework for understanding by design is beginning with the end in mind. So you're focusing on the overall goal and objectives of a lesson before you even start thinking about the steps or the resources or the activities that you're going to use. So the first thing I want to look at are the objectives for the week. So the first thing you'll begin with is defining your central focus for your learning segment. So a central focus is more like an overall goal. And your learning segment is a unit of study. So it's a broader topic. Again, central focus, learning segment. These are academic vocabulary terms that you should be aware of and start to use naturally in your writing. Your EdTPA narrative will be judged based on a lot of these academic vocabulary terms and how well you use them and apply them. Okay, so the next thing we're also going to do this week is to define 3 learning targets that are associated with your learning segment. Again, learning targets are essentially the objectives of your lessons. And you'll also align your learning segment with the AASL standards and the New York State science standards that you've used before. Just a little bit about the AASL standards. We as school librarians do not have our own New York State standards. We're largely infused in the other content areas like ELA or social studies. You will see within those standards information literacy and research associated standards. But AASL, which is the American Association for School Librarians, is sort of like our national professional organization that has put together standards by which we all should follow. I think you are aware that new standards are coming out in November. We are using essentially what will be the older standards, which is absolutely fine because it's our understanding that these standards aren't going to change that much. Okay, so if you get used to learning the current standards, you'll easily transition into using the new standards. Okay, so I also include the academic vocabulary for the week, and this is a really nice graphic that kind of shows you the relationship between these concepts. So you have your overall learning segment, which is your unit, that will be your topic. You'll have a central focus, which is more or less the goal of that topic, and within the central focus you should have 3 to 5 lessons. We're going to focus on 3 for our particular assignment. So keep that in mind when you're choosing a topic. It should be large enough where you can implement 3 separate lessons. So let's take a look at the assignment itself. So the scenario is similar to a previous assignment where you're collaborating with a science teacher and you're creating a unit of study. So the first thing I want you to do in the assignment is to watch a video about 10 minutes long. It is a little bit dry in terms of the narration, but it has terrific educational value, and it will really give you an understanding of the relationship between the standard, central focus, and learning target, particularly what EdTPA is looking for. This is super important for when you have to create your narrative. Also, I have links to 4 chapters within AASL Standards for the 21st Century. That's where you will become familiar with how to read those standards and choose those standards that are going to align best with your central focus. Okay, and then also I've included a link to the New York State Next Generation Science Standards that you've used already, and you've done a really good job of making sense of them because they are a little tricky to understand. All right, so you're going to define your segment title, your central focus. You're going to align it to your AASL standards, your New York State science standards, and I also want you to include what is referred to as a language function associated with your objectives. Remember, you're creating 3 lessons, or just defining 3 lessons in terms of the objectives that you would include. And language function is, again, another one of those academic vocabulary terms. Essentially, the language function refers to the verb that indicates the learning outcome. And Bloom's taxonomy is a hierarchy of levels of learning. And the higher up you go in the hierarchy, the deeper and more meaningful the learning is. So I have a link here to Bloom's taxonomy, and I want you to focus on those higher levels of learning. So analysis, synthesis, evaluation, and creativity, those are the higher levels of learning. Identify the verbs that you think are most appropriate, most reflect the objective of the lesson and the learning outcome that you expect from the student. So the whole premise here is that I'm going to design along with you. The first thing you need to do, though, is open up the blank template. This will be what you will continue to fill in as we go along in the next couple of weeks. Right now, we're just focusing on stage 1, the learning segment, the level, the central focus, and the learning targets. Okay, and I've included also an annotated not a bibliography, an annotated template that describes in detail exactly what you need to include. Okay, and then the last thing that I include is my UBD design. As a model, I've chosen alternative energy sources. For the 6th grade, I've listed here my central focus, which essentially is, it's a short statement. It's not a very long narrative. My New York State Science Standard, my 21st Century library standards, and then my 3 learning targets. Okay, so students will be able to 1, 2, and 3. And each one of these learning targets are essentially a lesson. Remember that I give a lot of feedback. I expect you to make revisions. This is a very iterative process where we can work together back and forth. So please let me know if you have any questions. You all are doing spectacular.